Hi, welcome to Chapter and Verse. Today I'm going to be in conversation with the phenomenal author Rex Pickett, who wrote that groundbreaking book and movie, Sideways. Rex also has a new mystery coming out in November called The Archivist that's already getting rave advanced praise. And Rex has a lot of other things going on in his life too. So stay with us through this whole conversation because you're going to be learning about the stories behind Rex's projects and books and films, and also some tips for writers and the art and craft of writing. And at the end, Rex is going to tell you his number one tip for prospective writers. And I'm going to tell you who my next guest will be in the next episode. I'm Rick Bleiweiss. I'm an award-winning author. I have a new mystery coming out called 𝐵𝐼𝐿 𝐵𝐿 and the Barbershop Detectives next February. I'm also a executive at Blackstone Audio and Publishing. And that's enough about me. And here is my friend and the phenomenal author, Rex Pickett.
Thank you for having me, Rick. I guess I'm your inaugural guest on your show, so I'm very excited about that. I'm honored, actually. So
I couldn't think of anybody better, Rex, let me tell you. So Rex, can you just talk about how you started? How did you get into writing? And I know you did some films as well. So how did that all start?
well, I grew up. I'm down here in Del Mar. I grew up in San Diego, California, and I was living in a neighborhood with basically a lot of surfers, stoners, and probably most of them are dead now. And all probably wanted to be musicians. And I was one of them, if you want to know the truth. And then I started. I think there was something in me that wanted to um, just go much further with my life than I saw where these people are going. Something awakened in me, and I started reading, honestly, and reading just um, really exposed me to a world and that I wanted to, I think, express something in myself. I think there was something really emotionally repressed. I mean, I had wonderful, dutiful parents, but my mother did not want to have children. Now I'm getting personal. I have a tendency to get personal, Rick, and she didn't want to have children. She told me this, and I think there was a lack of feeling, and I wanted a way to access feeling. I really did. Also, I'll tell you that little anecdote. When I was in senior in high school, I wrote a poem that got published in their magazine that they had at Claremont High School. It was called Mr. Pencilhead, and it was a satire of our principal, and he knew it. And I mean, it was scathing satire. He called me into his office, and he said, yeah, and he vilified me in no uncertain terms. But I thought, oh my God, the power of words, that I could actually get a principal to bring me, So it was really, and then I got into the University of California at San Diego. And San Diego back then was pretty much a Navy town. And like I said, surfer stoner town. And I was suddenly, but there's this little citadel in La Jolla, which is, we're going to get to the Archivist because half of it takes place there. And it was a small college back then. And I now was exposed to great minds, incredible films, the great Manny Farber, artist, film critic, literature professors. And I created a special projects major, which was specializing in contemporary literary and film criticism and creative writing. And I think writing for me initially was a way, like I did a lot of journaling early on. I wasn't really a narrative writer. I kind of came of age during postmodernism and metafiction, Thomas Pynchon and all those guys. And maybe I wanted to write like Samuel Beckett. And it took me a while. And now we're going to get to my tip. One of my tips early on is finding your voice. For me early on, I knew I couldn't play music, and I tried. My brothers were great musicians, and I wasn't an actor and I couldn't be an actor, but I needed an artistic form of expression. Otherwise, to be honest with you, I was suicidal. I was just going to leap off a cliff. I didn't want to do anything else but find an avenue of expression for what I was feeling inside, the darkness, the depression, the whatever. And for me, it was writing. And then I just started gorging on literature.
Oh, cool. Cool. So what was the first thing that you wrote that you went out with? And did you have an agent or did you go out with it yourself?
Well, we're leaping forward here a little bit. When I was at school, University of California, I made a couple of films, and I never really, I wrote a novel. I might have sent it to Black Sparrow Press. It was built up around 𝐶⁴ Bukowski, and I never heard back from them. By the way, I did found the first literary magazine at UCSD.
Oh,
called
cool.
Crawl Out Your Window. And we published some pretty famous people in there. And I was the editor for 3 issues until I left. But really, I went, I met my then wife, Barbara Schock, who's now the chair of NYU Tisch School of the Art Graduate Film. She has an Oscar for a short film I wrote. We'll probably get to that. And I went to LA and I went to USC Film School to make films, Rick. And so storytelling was really more starting for me was with screenwriting, even though I had written some kind of avant-garde short pieces or whatever. So I never really pushed the literary side. It was really film. And Barbara and I spent 10 years making 2 independent feature films, both massive road movies. The first one was a 1,000-mile road journey called California Without End, starts in San Francisco and ends in Baja California with a crew of 5. The second one was more ambitious, called From Hollywood to Deadwood. It was a 4,000-mile road movie, not in the digital day, in the analog day, when it was hard, it was expensive, 10 years out of our lives. But the first film was a little bit still kind of solipsistic. It was more about this, depressed writer, screenwriter. He's kind of going through his Sturm und Drang phase or whatever. But in my second film, which was a mystery, it's about 2 detectives, and this goes to sideways. The seed for Miles and Jack, Paul Giamatti and Thomas Hayden Church, was sown in From Hollywood to Deadwood with 2 characters named Raymond Savage. They were detectives. And so there was mysteries. I had mysteries early on, reading Raymond Chandler and this guy named Jack Haynes. So we have Jack, and they were the opposites. One was introverted. He was thoughtful. He was philosophical. He was intellectual. The other one was flamboyant. He was outrageous. Those characters are in my movie From Hollywood to Deadwood. We did sell it to Island Pictures, which was a big deal. And then they walked in after 2.5 years in post-production. Mark Berg walked in the editing room and just butchered the film in literally 4 hours. 4 hours, he just butchered a film. And it went out, it was released. The marriage kind of went, that way because it was so tough. But I realized with From Hollywood to Deadwood, from a writing standpoint, is I started to introduce comedy and I started to introduce things like conflict. Conflict, I don't think in my first film, California Without End, the conflict was really between the character and himself. And this is why Walker Percy's The Moviegoer has never been made. A great book, but it's never been made. Or Richard Ford's The Sports Writer, fantastic book, but now I had 2 guys playing off each other, and I started to understand story through screenwriting, Rick, not really through fiction. And we'll get to that in a moment. But it was really, and people love that script. In fact, that script From Hollywood to Deadwood, even though the movie didn't do well for whole kinds of shot on 100 locations over 4,000 miles. We were really seriously compromised. But the screenplay got my first job with Kevin Bacon at Columbia, then Columbia TriStar. They picked it out of 300 scripts, and I was the only one who didn't have an agent. And they said, "You're our writer." And they said, "Do you have an agent?" I said, "No." I'll never forget meeting Kevin Bacon's one of the nicest people I've met. And I said, "No." He said, "Get one." I get an agent. And of course, he for no reason, he dumps me 6 months later, but I get an agent, and I should have, here's one of my little pieces of advice: don't sign with the first agent you meet, because I'm handing them a commission with a major studio. But it got me into the Writers Guild, and they really responded to the story, the whole narrative arc. And we should go back to one other thing here quickly. I took 2 quarters off from the University of California, San Diego early on because I just didn't feel like I was ready. There was a lot of turmoil going on inside me and what I wanted to be. I was only 19, and I got $15 from a settlement from a car accident I'd been in when I was 17. And my father had to give me $1,500, which was a lot of money back in the 70s. Yeah. I went and bought the entire collected works of Carl Jung, 20 volumes. In fact, they looked, these big black books. And when I bought them, they said, "Don't you just want to buy 2 and maybe see if you like them?" I said, "No, I want all 20. So I go in all intent. I got 20. I put them in my apartment before the internet. I have no TV. I have maybe an AM, FM. I read every day, 6 hours a day for 8 months. 8 months, the entire collected works of Carl Jung, which of course was the whole basis of archetypal psychology. Joseph Campbell, of course, stole everything from Jung with Jung's blessing, with his Here with a Thousand Faces. And then Lucas trivialized Star Wars, but we don't need to go there. But I still go back to Jung. It's about the journey. For him, the journey was inward. That he called it the individuation process. You go into the unconscious, the anima figure, and now I exteriorize that. They're looking for a missing woman in From Hollywood to Deadwood. the Archivist is so much about that Jungian journey, for the people, and I hope many will read it and just think about Carl Jung and think of so many of the symbolic references and you start here and you go under. This is to me one of the great things that I've understood about narrative and storytelling. You start somewhere and you go down into the darkness. There you're annealed in the cauldron, or maybe you lose or whatever, and then redemption. You come back up. So I really, after I read that, I went back to school armed with a foundation, a belief system, Rick.
Right.
And I'm not saying I'm not saying go out and read the collected works of Carl Jung, but I did 6 hours a day,
Wow.
every day for 8 months. And that was very formative for me as a writer.
I'll bet it was. So Rex, talking about the Archivist, and your lady in your life is an archivist, correct?
Yeah, she doesn't want to, we have to be careful there, so.
Okay, but what was the inspiration for the book, and did you like plot it out, or did it just come to you as you were writing it? But tell us about the book and the process.
Well, in 2012, I was offered to go to the country of Chile to write Sideways 3 Chile. And I looked at my apartment in LA, all these books and everything, and I just dispossessed myself of everything. And that was hard. I even had to give away my Jung collection. I just dispossessed myself of everything. And I also had boxes and boxes of writings. And they had asked me at the University of California, San Diego, to take my archive. And I thought, well, and I joked about this at a faculty club dinner. I said, well, it's cheaper than public storage, and they all laughed because this is where Dr. Seuss is and Ray Armitrout, Pulitzer Prize winning poets, and I'll never forget this as long as I live. With an intern, I'd driven to LA back in the early 80s to go to USC Film School and ended up making 2 feature films and wrote scripts and stuff. And then, of course, Sideways happened, and that was huge. And, technically, I've won 2 Academy Awards. I returned to my university. I left to go to LA with 5 boxes of writing, and I returned with 50. That's it. I've had no children in my life, and it didn't escape me when I was sitting on a loading dock, just unloading these boxes. And I literally thought they were just going to put Pickett on them and put them in storage. And so then I went to Chile, came back, and we did Sideways the play in La Jolla Playhouse. So that's on the campus of UCSD, my alma mater, with Des McAnuff, who directed Jersey Boys. And we'd done the play up in LA at a little 50-seat theater. It ran 100 performances, shattered all records, whatever. And they held a big faculty club dinner for me to honor my archive being taken. And this woman comes up to me, Kate, who was, the assigned archivist, said, "Hi, I'm your archivist, and I processed your papers. I didn't know there was a human being behind it. Would you like to come down and see, what we've done?" And she took me into the library, into restricted areas, and down into what are called the stacks. And in these beautiful gray document buckets, you see records, papers, mandibles. I mean, when all the struggle and suffering and everything I've gone through, and you see your life's work. And this person who has she spent 4 to 6 months on this collection.
Wow.
She knows me better than I do. I wasn't reading old journals and everything, all beautifully organized in these beautiful, and my films and everything. And I mean, tears fogged my eyes, Rick.
I believe it.
Tears. I mean, my God, my life's work. And I said, oh my God, so I got to know Kate, I think the seed was sown for the Archivist there, but I had to write the Chile book and whatever. But, and again, that's the other tip for a writer is that I'm drawing from real life. I really, and I had to find the story in it. And then as I talked to her and I started to find out what archivists do, they are really like detectives. They go into a collection. Now, some maybe don't take that kind of time that Kate did, but they'll go here, they'll go there. And of course, when researchers come, they like the archivists who have taken that kind of incredible amount of assiduous care with a collection. Of course, a lot of collections have restrictions on them. Mine have no restrictions. I'm an open book or whatever. And so, I started to ideate, in all fairness, this idea. And I decided to write it as a mini series. And I wrote the first, the pilot or the first, episode, but I was so engrossed and taken by the story. My God, this is the long goodbye. This is the Jungian journey. This is, but it's through these other characters. And also I'm a fan of tragic love stories like The English Patient. So there's another side to it too, which is in there. And I just wrote all 8 episodes. Nobody has done that on spec. I don't think ever in the history of Hollywood. And just before I was going to give it to my agent, a guy named Rick Bleiweiss calls me and says, Rex, we're not just, you of course had done all 3 of my Sideways audiobooks. And you said, we're not just an audiobook, producer anymore. We're now a full-scale publisher. Do you have an idea? And I said, well, Rick, I wrote this 8-part miniseries. And it's really the adaptation of a novel that I didn't write, but I had ideated it. But I'd love to write the novel because I think I can go deeper and richer with it. And you and I, we're going to ages out. We did it. This is the first time I've seen you. We did a deal over the phone. You said, sent me there were no agents, nothing. And I was so grateful that Blackstone was giving me. I mean, you did such a wonderful job. And I'm not just blowing smoke up you here. You really did such a wonderful job with the 3 audiobooks for me, and it gives new life 3 Sideways books. But so I didn't care about the deal, the contract money. Because you should have got more money from Rick. I said, I don't care. He's giving me the opportunity to write my novel. And there's another tip for writers. You know what? If you're given that opportunity and you're going to be published, take it, because you don't know where it's going to lead. And I said, I didn't care. It was nice, but I didn't care. It was about the work to me. And that's what I want to say to writers too. It should be about the work first and foremost. Sure, we all want to be bestsellers and we all want millions of people to read, us. But for me, is like, I wanted to go into that story really deeply, and you gave me the opportunity.
Well, it was my pleasure. I love working with you.
Yeah.
So tell me, I know, but I think the people who are going to be seeing this don't. Just give us a synopsis of what The Archivist is about.
Well, The Archivist, it all takes place at a fictional version of 𝐬𝐮𝐬𝐫𝐞 Library. So that's Theodore 𝐬𝐮𝐬𝐫𝐞, which is Dr. Seuss. That's where my work is. It's an extraordinary library. I urge everyone to go online and just Google it. It's one of the 5 greatest, beautiful architectural brutalist style libraries. And so it's about a young 27-year-old project archivist who comes down. Think of her as like a lone, there's all these kind of wonderful metaphors here, kind of a lone gunslinger, comes down to finish up the processing of the collection of a very famous author, who's maybe shortlisted for a Nobel or whatever. And her predecessor had died in a drowning. Okay. And she's to finish it up. There's going to be a big gala on the 8th floor. They're renovating the entire 8th floor. There's money involved. And this is all fictional. It's not roman à clef, but it is drawn from certain things. And the famous novelist whose papers are being processed, his wife is an extremely wealthy person who is donating millions for this 8th floor renovation and so on. As our young 27-year-old archivist gets into the collection, she starts seeing clues and things, and it leads her to an epistolary exchange between the famous novelist and her dead, drowned predecessor. And it is a torrid, romantic, whatever. And now I go back in time to Nadia Fontaine's story. But Emily Snow is really, as this 27-year-old, it's kind of actually, my German isn't great, but a Bildungsroman. It's a coming of age story of her in a way. She's really an adult Nancy Drew in many ways. Right. And once she comes across this, normally what you're supposed to do in the archival world, you're supposed to go to the head of special collections or to your supervisor and say, God, I found all this stuff. And it's out there on what are called the dark archives. So there's a lot of stuff that's on servers that you can't get to. 90% of the Smithsonian is in the dark archives or these servers, and or dark storage as they call it. And Emily Snow finds it, and it leads her further and further. And then she finds out her predecessor, who's an artist in her own right, not only was having a torrid affair with this guy, which is, by the way, highly unethical in the archival world. It's a fireable offense on the spot. And if you have tenure or whatever, they could just get rid of you. And it's a very nuanced novel in that way. It's not like, there's, a serial on the loose on page 1. It's not like that, because I'm interested in things about truth and legacy. How do you want to be remembered? And do you want to bury the famous novelist and the dead archivist, the predecessor, they were madly in love. They were collaborating on a book together. He's buried this whole thing in his past. He thinks it's over. And Emily Snow, this 27-year-old, pesky little 27-year-old, she disinters. She dredges up this and has the guts to present it to him. And now this is where things change. And now it merges. I don't want to give it anything away.
Spoiler alerts here.
Okay, but it's a tragic love story that then maybe she didn't drown.
Well, I've read it, and I think the mystery is fabulous. I loved the descriptions of place and time, and in the early going in the book, it's not kind of going to give anything away, but there's a lot of reference to the fires that are going on in California, and the real life stuff. So and the interpersonal relationships between some of the characters are very realistic, with jealousies and different kinds of turf ownage, if you will. And I found it very well written.
Thank you. Well, all my work, once or twice in my life, I've been commissioned to write a script, and I was in a world that I didn't know. I was the last writer in Alien 3, whatever. It's when I'm in a world that I know, and here's another tip for a writer. And so here, you are looking at me right now. You are in the efficiency apartment of Emily Snow, the protagonist. So when I'm with her and her stories in third person, I'm walking in here. When I'm at the library, I know the library. I know the special collections. As far as the interpersonal relationships, so many of them do, draw on real things, and maybe even more so with Sideways. Sideways was so soul-bearing and so personal. I mean, I hate to say it because she tells me not to say it. My ex-wife told me to burn it. And a woman who started dating wanted to read this novel because there was a lot of hype around. She came over to my place, and I thought this was like a budding romance. And she said, "How can you be so personal?" She said it accusatorily, Rick. I went, "Oh my!" I didn't see her again until, by the way, the closing night of the New York Film Festival, when Sideways played in front of 2,000 people at the Alice Tully Hall, and she goes, "I guess I was wrong." I write and I make people uncomfortable. In fact, when they read it at the library, there might be a little, even though we had a wonderful shoot there the other day and it brought back memories because I had not been down in the stacks in a long time. I write from a very personal place. I want characters to come alive. I'll tell you a novel that had a big effect on me in a lot of ways was Ernest Hemingway's The Sun Also Rises. And it was a radical work because it was so dialogue driven. It was scene driven.
Yes.
And in fact, the guy who was Alexander Payne's assistant, who read Sideways, an unpublished manuscript, and got it to him with a ringing endorsement, he had staged The Sun Also Rises, for his senior thesis in college. And I think he saw it as like a modern day Also Rises in a way. But the point, I'm not going to compare myself to a Nobel Prize winning author, but I do love dialogue. Dialogue makes characters come alive, and I like things to be scene driven as opposed to someone just going off, whatever. But in order to do that, you have to inhabit the characters. You have to be in the world. So yes, right down here is the bluff. There's pelicans going by. This is all my novel on film, by the way, the other day for our trailer, and it's great. I everywhere I go, I want to know I've been there. With Sideways, I've been to the hitching post. When I'm walking in there, when I'm writing, I'm in that place. When I'm talking to Jack, it's my friend Roy. I know exactly what he's going to say in this situation. That's just where I come from. If I believe it and I can write it and I can inhabit it, and that you're absolutely right. Setting, I grew up in San Diego, so the ocean, the surf is very much a part of it. The drowning happened at Black's Beach, which is this remote beach. Now it's a nude beach, but a clothing optional beach. But I know all these places. And I think that adds, and here's another key word, we're getting to writing tips, verisimilitude, the ring of truth. When you're a writer, I mean, yes, there's all kinds of different writings, but for me, it's about the ring of truth. If you believe it, and so many people, here we are over 2 decades after I wrote Sideways, and people tell me how Miles, Paul Giamatti, my alter ego, because I wrote it in first person, how he's relatable. They like him because I dared to bare my soul and make him vulnerable and make him open and just with all his foibles and flaws. That's who I was at that time. I was unafraid to go there. The Archivist is a little bit different, but because I'm inhabiting two women characters, which is new for me. But I didn't find that, and I would have a lot of women read it. And of course, you gave me a great woman editor and everything else. But I think it's really for me. I know I digressed there,
No, that's
but
okay.
it's about inhabiting your world and being in that world and knowing your world. Yes, there are great science fiction writers who go off and imagine other universes and stuff, and that's fine too. But this is how I write.
So in that regard, I know when I write, I tend to see it playing as a movie in my head. And to some degree, my job is to transcribe what I'm seeing in my head.
Right.
Do you use that kind of a process, or do you plot it out and know kind of, and then go along writing things? Or how do you create the books?
Well, that's a great question. Alexander Payne said in many interviews, Rex's novel was so easy to adapt because he thinks like a screenwriter. You have to remember, I've made 2 feature films. I've written more screenplays than novels, although I prefer the novel form. I don't think about it, Rick, but it is really for me. So screenplays are dialogue driven and scene driven. It's simple as that. And if you think of a screenplay, you think of a novel, think of a lake. And a novel is really stepping into the lake and walking all the way to the end of the lake. It really is. But a screenplay is like a frog leaping from lily pad to lily pad on that same lake. Is really the difference between, but you still have to know that whole lake in order to be able to successfully leap in that way. And that screenplay, a good screenplay is hard to write. A mediocre screenplay is easy to write. A mediocre novel is not hard, is not easy to write, to be honest with you, because it's still so many words and you're trying to create a world. So I do think like a screenwriter, but I don't, but in the publishing industry, we had 240 rejections on Sideways in 4 separate sets of submissions. Even after it had been greenlit as a film, they still reject it because it's too much, like they pejorativize it as an oversexed screenplay, and anyway, I wish I hadn't sold it for $5,000, but that's another story. We won't go into that, and of course, my 5% net points, which I never saw anything. But you coming from the music business, you know how that all works. But no, I do think of movies. My big love was movies, Rick. I've seen thousands of movies, chased movies through revival houses and everywhere, and I think it comes naturally to me. I think that dialogue and scene driven brings characters to life, 3-dimensionally to life. And to me, that's the goal, is to bring them 3-dimensionally and then have something that's nested in them, a conflict that has to be resolved in some way, something they're wrestling with, in their soul. And with The Archivist, I said to somebody the other day, and at the risk of immodesty, and they gave me a rave blurb and everything else. And I said, look, I'm hunting bigger game. I mean, I could probably write something, shorter and, maybe just more punch, whatever, blah, 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 and serial killers, and he's kind of killing another person or whatever, FBI profile. But I'm not really, the mystery is important to me, but the deeper themes of truth and love and what is love and how far will people go for love. I'm interested in those themes. So the mystery sort of is for me just the I don't know, the scaffolding in a way inside which I'm exploring these deeper themes about, well, actually it really is about love and how do you want to be remembered in life,
Yeah. So I want to go back to what you were talking about with Sideways, because when I'm on social media and I'm interacting with authors and aspiring authors, a number of them talk about the fear of rejection. And, I always say to them, oh my God, Barbara Streisand got rejected. Harry Potter got rejected. I think Stephen King may have been rejected. And to talk about how many times Sideways was rejected, even after it had been greenlit with a film, I think it's very important for other authors to hear that and realize that rejection's part of the game and part of the process, and virtually everybody goes through it. I've gone through it. But that you shouldn't let it stop you. You should go for what you believe in. So
we're going to come back and have a whole episode about rejection, because you can go down to _𝐾𝐨𝐧'𝐭 Library into the Mandeville Special Collections, and you can go into the Rex Pickett papers and see 240 rejection letters on Sideways, a book that became a very faithfully adapted book, by the way, that went on to gross $650 million. What is wrong with you people? I mean, the rejection letters go to your agent, because I had an agent then, dear Mitchell, why did you send me this piece of shit? Literally, blah, blah, Harper Collins. And he sent them to me, chin up, Rex. I mean, and I mean, they can be harsh. Why did you waste my time, Mitchell? I mean, I ran through this and whatever. This isn't a novel. It's like going on and on, I think, of course, after Sideways, rejection's easier because, as Liz Taylor famously said, success is the best deodorant. But before that, I think when I wrote Sideways, I had nothing to lose. I was dead broke. Process servers were knocking on my door. This is not hyperbole. This was my life. I've said many times, if I could have afforded a gun, I would have shot myself. I had nothing. I just bared my soul. I laid it all out there. I think that if you try, I know that there are a lot of people. Look, I've never read a book on how to write a book. I've never read a book on how to write a screenplay. I don't want to know any of that stuff. I don't want to know, for example, that, by the way, a novel I wrote before Sideways was 𝐿a Purísima, and it got me a good agent. And it was a mystery novel, and had it been published, and that had nice rejection letters, by the way. They were nice. So Miles in Sideways, Paul Giamatti, the book he can't get published is that book called 𝐿a Purísima, which is a golf course up there. And the reason it didn't get published, and this is in the movie and in the novel, is because they didn't know how to market two guys who met on a golf course, because 95% of mystery readers are women. And they said, otherwise it would have been, and there wouldn't have been a Sideways, So if I had read, I don't know, literary magazines or book, magazines that come out that, are helping, writers' journals, whatever, saying, don't write a mystery if it doesn't have women crocheting, because you'll never sell it. I don't want to know that, Rick. I have to write what is in my soul. And that book, 𝐿a Purísima, it should have been published. It was actually a terrific book, and it would have set in motion a character, would have been a detective, but that's long ago. I just, I think as far as rejection goes, I have a lot of self-coined quotes. Okay, so here's one of them. I do this, because I've answered these questions many times. Nothing is above criticism itself. Okay, nothing is above criticism itself. Just because somebody says it doesn't make it so.
Okay. Amen.
And you need to know that, because with Sideways, everybody turned out, not just the publishing industry, we went out to the film world with it. They all turned it down. And those, you don't hear about those rejections. One guy, Alexander Payne, and his assistant read it, said, you have to read this. There's my answering machine. I was dead broke. I was coming back from Baja Fresh, and I had a $6 meal and my credit card was declined.
Wow.
And I had two messages on my ancient answering machine, and one was from my agent screaming, Alexander Payne just read Sideways. Oh my God. Everyone had given up on it. My agent had given up on it. Everyone had given up on it. It's his next film. Well, it wasn't his next film. It's like one person can change your life. You have to find your voice. You have to write. You have to, you have to go your own path in your own way. I think, I know there's so many people listening to this thing, well, but these are the books that are selling right now, and this and that. I just, for me, I don't think about that. I write, what is inside for me, and I try, and that rejection, of course, after Sideways, it was easier, because for me, it's like, you were all wrong. So maybe I'm doing something right, and I didn't listen to you. Because if you listen to all that noise out there, it can give you whiplash. You can lose it. So I'll tell you another little tip. Don't show somebody anything that you're writing until you at least get a draft that you want, because they can derail you. That happened when I was 20 years old, and I won't go into that digressive story, but I was 100 pages into a novel, and I gave it to a close friend of mine. He read the first chapter, and the main character was so depressed, but it was a novel of redemption. He said, this is terrible. And I abandoned the novel. Wow. I abandoned it. I wish I could have gotten to the end and failed. So forget rejection, fail, then fail again and fail again. And you know what? They might go back and buy those earlier books of yours. But nobody, of course, everyone is going to have an opinion. And of course, there's people like you who are in that position of power, and you want to sell books and everything else. And that's just, if you're scared of that, as I've said, people think I lived a charmed life, but they wouldn't want to live the life I've lived in order to live the ostensibly charmed life I'm currently living. This is what I do. This is who I am. I'm nobody else. I'm going to do it. And if you don't like it, I'm just going to keep doing it. I'm not going to change. It's my voice.
Right. That's great. Did you have any idea how much of an impact Sideways would have on the Pinot Noir industry?
Yeah, and of course the Merlot question,
Yeah.
I mean, it's funny, we're doing three, so we did Sideways the play, hugely successful. Now we have Sideways the musical. We have all 18 songs. They're already done, but of course with the pandemic, so we're doing a concert of songs in Sonoma, September 10th, 11th, 12th. I have to be up on stage to lead people through the songs or whatever. So the novel that my ex-wife told me to burn in '99,
Right.
and I'd written her an Oscar-winning short, and she told me to burn it. And a woman I just started dating said, "I can't see you. You're just, you're toxic." Here we are 22 years later, and now there's a big celebration of Jack and Miles, and of course the women characters too. For me, of course, I'm just hoping I sell the novel, Rick. I don't know it's going to be a movie. Right. That the movie is going to, the hitching post, that guy, his place to this day is just 4 deep with people. The Windmill Inn where the main characters stay in the movie, it's now the Sideways Inn.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. No, I don't, by the way, just before you ask, no, I don't get a royalty from that. So, and the clubhouse bar where Jack is all messed up in his head and he's going to call off his wedding, it's now the Sideways Lounge. Oh. Yeah. So, you don't know how that's going to go down. And of course, the famous Merlot line, but that was the first song I wrote. No fucking Merlot. I love that song. And people just laugh when they hear it. I don't know, Rick. I'm just writing a book. I'm hoping the book gets published. Of course, I'd like it to be a movie. There was a lot of promise that it would be, but what's happened to it and that people, I go to Italy to write a script. I'm down in Chile. They know me down there. They don't know me, but they know Sideways. Yeah. It's become iconic. It is entered pop. I'm a question on Jeopardy.
That's kind of like the sign you've made it.
Yeah, thank you, Beth. And actually, Alex Trebek was still alive then. And they actually used my name in the question. Rex Pickett of this 2004 novel really did once take a sip of wine from the spit bucket. And this guy, 20 years old, this was just a couple of years ago, hits the buzzer sideways. It's like, wow. And my ex-wife actually called me when she saw that, but it's, you don't know that. And if you sit down and write and you try to write something that's going to be the next Harry Potter or the next Star Wars, it probably won't be, because it's really the originality, the kind of the sui generis sort of quality there. I'm just, at that time, I'm just bearing my soul. I'm in a state of despond and failure. But I did one thing though, it was sideways. So here's another thing. I said to myself, okay, Rex, if it's just Miles up there and it is, you don't give them a foil and you don't make this funny, nobody's going to buy despair. And so I said, I like to make people laugh. I like to I joke all the time. The Archivist is a little more serious. The humor isn't quite there as it is with Sideways, but it's a novel. It's a different kind of book.
So, do you have any thoughts at all on self-publishing? I know a lot of times people online, especially, are going, "Should I self-publish or try to get an agent and a publisher?" And I'm just wondering if you have any feelings or thoughts on the subject.
Yeah, I think self-publishing is a pretty tough route. I think that it's I think a lot of people what they do is they they book, they can't get an agent, they can't get a publisher, but I'm gonna damn it, I'm gonna get my book out there and I'm just gonna self-publish it, and then the problem is they find out there's been they've sold 10 copies or 15 copies or whatever. I guess, but there are exceptions. The woman who wrote Legally Blonde self-published, and then they made a movie out of it, and then she sold it, which I wish I had done, but she sold it for over $1 million, and now there's sequels or whatever. I guess feel like you want to get the great thing with a publisher, like with you guys, is there's a whole team behind you. You came down, it was so wonderful. St. Martin's Press, who published Sideways, did not spend one nickel for promotion on that book, nothing. So don't think a publisher actually means anything in some way. They spent not one nickel. And the book came out right before the movie. They had a film that won over 350 critics and awards organizations, and they just still didn't care. We spent $5,000 for your book. The movie is selling the book. It sold quite a few copies, 250,000, but it should have sold 3 or 4 or 5 million. It should have every tasting room on the Pacific Coast. Yeah. They literally didn't care. I couldn't do anything. But having a publisher, Blackstone, you feel like, you have people who are supportive. You feel like you're in a home. There's marketing behind you. There's that kind of money. Of course, everyone wants to have an agent, but I did this deal with you, and I do have a publishing agent. But if the deal comes to me, I'm not gonna. So an agent is fine. That's one possible conduit. There's a lot of different roads. I think. I'm not against self-publishing because I have seen it be successful. But on the other hand, if you can get a publisher, then obviously it is better because there's a support system behind you, especially if they believe in you. And if they have success, they might want another book from you too.
No, I think you're absolutely right. And in fact, the self-published authors that I know who have been successful in self-publishing, one of the things they have in common is they spent and committed quite a bit of their own money to advertising and marketing. Because it's hard to get your book seen when nobody knows it's there.
Well, and the thing is, here's another tip, because I've dealt with publicists my whole life. If you're unfortunately, Joe or Jane nobody, the publicist will take your $10,000, but they're only as good as what they're selling. That's right. I have a publicist on our Sonoma concerts, but you say Sideways and you say Rex Pickett, I'm getting interviews and they're flying me up there in August and I'm doing all these things up there. And, but they'll take your money. They won't say to you, well, blah, blah. And they'll try, they'll put out a press release and whatever. But, you also have to remember too, there's so much content out there with the internet. In fact, somebody said to me the other day that there's more content pushed by the internet every 48 hours than in the entire 20th century. So everyone's a publisher, everyone's on TikTok, everyone's a musician, everyone, there was, the winnowing process of the old days of the 70s or 60s had its bad side. People were excluded, let's be frank, whatever. But it had a good side. You did have people who were supposedly knowledgeable about what they thought was literature, what they thought was great music, what they thought was a great movie, and there was a winner. Now there's just so much content coming at it. It's like a tsunami, and they're looking for sort of islands of recognizability. If you have to self-publish, I will say you could be published by a legitimate publisher at one point. And there are examples of that, not just Legally Blonde, but there are other examples of that. However you get it out there, however you want to do it, I wouldn't waste a lot of money on PR if I'm self-publishing, because they're not going to be able to do a lot for you. But there's, we live in that hopes and dreams world, Yeah.
So do you see The Archivist as being made into a movie? And if so, do you want to write the script or do you want somebody else to write it?
Rick, let's go back to the beginning of our conversation. I've already written the script.
Oh God, I spaced. You're absolutely
but I'm just kidding.
You wrote it as a TV show, right? An episode.
No, it's a limited series. I don't think it would be a feature film, and that gets us into another conversation about where feature films are today, and they're not the same. I think it could be a feature film, but I really think because of the length of the novel and the depth of it, and it does go back in time. To a second story. There's a novel nested within the main novel. I think that it lends itself. That's why I wrote it originally as a limited series. So like a 8 episode limited series. Like Big Little Lies and
right.
Whatever. It's a little different than that, but it's that would be the dream. And again, all it's going to take is one person, a Reese Witherspoon or a Cate Blanchett, and says, no, I love it, or a Jane Campion, the great director. Right. I have to make it. But they're inundated with content too. I would love to see this on the screen. I wrote it to be on the screen,
Cool. So before I ask you the final tip for writers, is there anything else you'd like to talk about or bring up about any of the books you've written or anything else?
Well, I'm very fortunate. Sideways, and here is part of a tip too. Keep doing the work, and you will get it to somebody at some point. You've got to have the goods when you do. And I never gave up with Sideways. I mean, bear in mind, you talk about Stephen King and whatever, he might've been rejected in his 20s. Tried being rejected by Carrie, which he wrote when he was 25. He wasn't rejected anymore. Right. I was rejected in my 40s. Okay. That's brutal. And but this is what I couldn't become a waiter anymore. That's what I was going to do. Just keep doing the work and it will get somewhere. And it only takes one person. I mean, how it got to Alexander Payne, well, it will be in my autobiography, which is called My Life on Spec. I mean, one little thing could have gone this way or that way. Luck is involved in this. It isn't totally, another one of my self-coined adages, life is not a meritocracy. There is, sometimes you can have great connections and now you have an easier road. And I'm not going to name any names, but there's plenty of them in Hollywood and nepotism and stuff. I think you just have to, it's just, for me, I do the work I love. I love to write. I don't care that I'm not rich. All I care about is free time, Rick. That's all I care about is free time, that I don't have to go out and do this or that. Yes, I have wines coming out from Chile now. I'm trying to finally monetize the sideways success after all these years, because I've seen people make millions and millions. But the truth of the matter is if I have free time and I can wake up in the morning and I can write The Archivist and I can write the new novel, I'm writing now, or my autobiography and these other things, I consider myself to be a very lucky person. Remember, writing doesn't owe you anything. It owes you nothing. You are the one who have to give it to that page, and for me, and here's one of my tips, and I will get into it. I won't write unless I have an ending. I literally won't write. That ending is my I don't know, my North Star or whatever you want to call it. That, and I won't write until I can hear the characters in my head. And I sort of can see the journey. I don't care how I get there, but I'm going to get to that ending. And as long as I have free time, I consider myself to be an extremely fortunate and privileged person. Even though I grew up middle class with no connections, no nothing, if I can have, it is a privilege to be able to do art and to have free time. And then one day someone named Rick Bleiweiss calls up and say, "Hey, what's going on, Rex?" And well, I got this, and I'd like to write it. Well, sounds great. Let's do a deal. And then you extend that privilege to me, and I feel very, very fortunate and lucky. It should not be about the money to people. It should not be about the fame, of which I've seen both in my life and, pissed one away through my drinking days, but we won't get onto that. That'll be my autobiography, by the way. And of course there is the fame, and I do get that, but that isn't what matters to me. What matters to me is that I can wake up every day and do the work, and have the time to do it.
That's great. And you've been very complimentary to me and to Blackstone, and I thank you for that on behalf of everybody at the company.
You gave me a huge opportunity. I mean, you really did.
I must say to anybody that's listening and sees this, that you have been, in my opinion, a model author as well for us. You're tremendously bright, cooperative, personable, enthusiastic. You're a pro, and it's just been a phenomenal process from start to finish. I don't know how else to put it.
I really thank you, Rick. And, I just thank you for the opportunity, to write this book. I know it was a difficult book, and, we, wrestled with it with editors and everything else. It was a big book and whatever. And, and everything is short and everyone's attention spans, but I believe in deep immersive reading. And I think when people get into this book, they'll see that it needed to be this way. And when you come out the other end, I think, the people who are reading it so far, they do feel like, wow, I have, kind of like, I don't want to compare myself, but, I don't remember, I read Don Quixote when I was 19 years old. It was 1,000 pages, not that this is, but, and you come out the other end, you feel like, oh, I was rewarded for that, as opposed to something you just read and you just threw in the trash. I want to be remembered that way. And I have been with Sideways. I wrote something that's indelible. It's and I hope with this book and maybe future iterations of the character that I can explore those themes of ethics and truth and crossing the line and transgression and what the cost and consequences are, because it's really about those things. And Blackstone, has been so great. I mean, seeing that film crew down here the other day, where was St. Martin's Press? Was Sideways. They should have had a film crew. They should have had me going to wineries, whatever. No, we did a wonderful, and you've been incredibly supportive, and I couldn't be more grateful for what you've done.
Thank you, and I hope we do a lot more books together. So
I hope
I do. So do you have a final tip for aspiring authors?
Well, people say, write what you know, and then other people say, well, don't write what you know, just research it or whatever. I am kind of that thing, write what you know, but I will give you a tip, and it comes from another writer. I'm going to give two quick tips. One is a writer, Alice Hoffman, who's a well-known writer, said she was at Stanford Creative Writing Department, and a teacher said, quantity over quality. I went, whoa, I guess that's how I am. I just pour it out. I wrote the first draft of The Archivist in 90 days, and we know it's a big book. 90 days, Rick, you know, and I just want to get the story out. I recommend that to writers. Get it out. There are writers, I'm not going to mention famous ones, who say, write one page and rewrite it and rewrite it and rewrite it. You know what, Rick? I don't have enough X-lax for that kind of stuff. Just get the story out. You can go back and rewrite. You can go and change, and you can do those things. So that's what I say. Just get it out. Pour it out. Just and be unbridled. Don't feel like someone's looking over your shoulder, your ex-wife, and they're gonna hate it or whatever. That's the kiss of death. You're gonna have paralysis by overanalysis. Just let it go. And then there's the great Raymond Chandler, the great mystery writer, who wrote The Long Goodbye just down the road from me here. And he said to a writer, now this is, bear in mind, is, you know, before the internet, but he said, spend 4 hours every day either writing or thinking about what you're writing, but do nothing else.
Okay.
And that's hard to do today because my phone rang and I thought I had silenced it. So I'm sorry about that. And text messages and people, okay, I'm going to go to Twitter, but I'll come back to it. But still, I think if you can just kind of put yourself in that bubble for 3 or 4 hours, you don't need more than that, because when I'm writing The Archivist, for example, I'm stepping into the stream. I'm writing all day, but I'm only writing for 3 hours. But the rest, I'm thinking about it. Sure, I'm shopping and I'm talking to people, whatever. I like that Raymond Chandler thing. 3 or 4 hours every day, just either thinking about what you're writing or writing it, but do nothing else, you know?
Oh, I agree with you. And just in case point of fact, I'm in the midst of writing the second Scorpion book, and I've got to a point in it where I'm close to the end of one of the mysteries being solved, and I realize I have to go back and put some more red herrings in and some additional clues. And it's like I'm thinking about that all day, and then another day I'm going to write it. So I'm totally with you. You need to be thinking it, not just writing it.
Well, you are. It's not even, you shouldn't even have to tell yourself you're thinking it. You just are. You are living in that world. I am living, when I'm writing the art, I am living in that world. You know, I'm in a bubble. Yeah, I can still have a conversation with somebody and take a business call or whatever. But you know, and I keep this little app on my phone called Day One, which I love, and it's dedicated to, you know, this project or that project. And at night I have ideas. I just immediately just put in a keyword or something or a note or whatever. And so you'll go back. You'll get to the end of your new book, and your first one was terrific, by the way. We're different. You go back in time in a different place and inhabit different characters and do it, you know, with a great deftness and skill. But I think that, you know, you'll be able to go back and plant those red herrings in, but you need to get that spine.
Oh, yeah.
Find the spine of your novel. This is my other great tip. You know, that emotional spine. To me, The Archivist, it is a mystery, and a door opens. It's like Pandora's box, and it opens another door, and it's really this tragic love story emerges. And then what really happened to your predecessor, and going to, or sideways, a different way. We're just going off on a bachelor party for a week, but oops, things kind of go wrong. But meanwhile, you know, the characters have inner lives. Give your characters inner lives. You know, Miles he can't pay his rent, so he takes money from his mother. He's he's got a book hanging in the balance, and if it doesn't get published, his whole life is ruined, whatever. And meanwhile, his friend is cheating on his fiance. My God, I don't need this in my life, you know. So now we got conflict. Think about that. Conflict will drive you through a book, because conflict gives you, it gives you drama, it gives you comedy, and it gives you resolution. And for me, resolution, now I need to hoist it up one more notch: redemption. I wanted Miles to be redeemed at the end. There's no question. I mean, The Archivist, when you get to the end, it brings tears to my eyes, because it's a Pyrrhic victory for everybody, but they're all redeemed. Not everyone, but they've won in some tragic kind of way, where they've come to some peace with what they've done, you know. And they've all, and young Emily Snow, she solves a mystery that she didn't even know was a mystery. She just came down for a job, right. You know. But I knew there was a mystery, and I knew I was going to go there. And you know, there's a mystery too, and we can go back and we can change and solve those things. And then ultimately, you know, we're going to have to show it to people, and we're going to have to weather the response, and and then deal with that part of it, you know. And I think just get it out there, find your voice through book after book. find your voice, differentiate your voice from other voices. I read books, there is no voice sometimes. It's just, it's written like it was written by a computer. Fine. And I think that's what people respond to in Sideways, Rick. There's a really kind of, original voice there. The guy you're seeing right now, it's like, he's self-deprecating. He wears his heart on his sleeve. He's a little over intense and stuff like that. That's my voice. And I'm unafraid to go there. You have to be fearless if you want to do what you and I are doing. You have to be fearless.
I agree. Thanks, Rex. That's great. And great.
Thank you, Rick. And it was great to meet you and the opportunity and everything you've done for me. And I hope I found a home with Blackstone Publishing. I really do.
I know you did. So I'm glad. And I hope everybody that's seen this has enjoyed it and benefited from the knowledge that Rex has imparted and stories. And next author that I will be talking with is 𝐃𝐨𝐧'𝐿, who is the author of the House of Night YA series that's sold tens of millions of books. And I think you will find that an interesting episode as well. But this was phenomenal, Rex. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rick. All right. Take care.
Take care.